right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of our podcast. My name is David Levine, founder and CEO of ResTech Solutions. Today's topic, we are talking about the hidden costs of outdated systems in healthcare. And joining us today is Jennifer Yoder. So, Jennifer, if you'd like to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you and your business.
Certainly. My name is Jennifer Yoder, and I actually come to this topic in a nonlinear way, and it is anchored around customer experience. So I spent many years working into luxury brands like Prada, and then transferred over to work in software that was in customer experience and data analysis, and a lot of IoT, Internet of Things, so a combination of hardware and software. So I've worked extensively with IT teams to be able to maintain those systems. And like you, David, I don't really shut it off. This is a big part of who I am. I like to work from the customer backwards always and really see the impact that great anticipatory planning and service and architecture really makes the difference. And that's not just for B2C customers, that's for patients and their providers as well.
All right. Well, phenomenal. I'm glad you're able to join us today.
Yeah. At the moment, I am working with a community organization called Retail Women in Tech, helping them scale some of their community, through Slack, as well as building community on the ground where I live in Austin, Texas, and then doing consulting back into different businesses that are looking to build experiences for the folks that they serve and really having that be the key to long-term value, decreased customer acquisition costs, and a great retention, great reputation.
That sounds great. So I can't wait to hear more as we dive in today and go through everything. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into our first question based on today's topic. So from your perspective in customer experience and partnerships, what are some of the hidden costs you've observed when healthcare organizations rely on outdated systems, especially in terms of patient trust, efficiency, or retention?
This one has a direct through line into the B2C world because you have to think about patients, our customers as well, and they increasingly see their healthcare as, and it's another service in their lives. So they're comparing directly their experiences with their providers to their experiences with B2C retailers, e-commerce, and now that the world has sped up so much and changed so much in the last 5 years, folks who aren't responding and really treating it as an opportunity to win people's business, because let's be honest, that's what it is, they're going to be left behind. Yes, we know that there are bottlenecks in terms of the scarcity of providers and specializations in some areas. But we also know that providers really can move the needle. They can make the difference in terms of not only outcomes as far as people's lives, but also how they feel about their providers. And that often is just as important in really making sure that people are healthy.
Well, that's great. I appreciate that. So now I want to kind of get a little more into the business side and, give
Yeah.
people some more insight. It's exactly it is what y'all do. So can you start by telling us a bit more about your company, what inspired you to start it, and how does your work help organizations improve the overall experience for patients or customers?
Well, in terms of my own work in consultancy, I've been inspired by working into B2C and B2B2C companies who really are trying to get a better handle on how their customers want to be in community with them. And that's incredibly important, especially when we're on the precipice of another economic change. In times of economic uncertainty, people really look to those that they can trust throughout their lives, from their consumer decisions to their healthcare decisions. And the reason why I really started to get into paying attention of what was going on in healthcare is through my own providers. My providers, my OBGYN clinic, for example, they know that I worked in customer success and customer experience and solutions. And we would talk. during some of my appointments, and they were adopting, a new CRM system, patient portal system, excuse me, and they weren't getting the kind of service that they needed. And also, they just really hadn't been onboarded to understand what was actually possible in terms of automations, in terms of some of the security clearances that they really needed to be current on in order to protect their patients. And now that so many of these systems have kind of joined forces to where if you are a patient in one major system, many of them have linked up so that your records can be shared across, through the portals. And that saves a whole lot of red tape for patients who are in the past have had to track down manually and get a hold of their records and send them over. That friction, it can make or break providers' relationships with new patients. Really that first visit or the first two visits that someone comes to see a provider is the most critical time in terms of retention. Once you get past those, they're coming back, where they've started to build that trust. But if you have a good experience in office and then a not so good experience, in terms of your portal, or your portal doesn't answer questions that can assuage fears or give patients an opportunity to speak to you directly, you're causing friction that is going to erode that trust. And it's incredibly important when people are out there, they're looking online, they're going through reviews, people are really choosing providers today in a way that they haven't been able to before because a lot of the information wasn't as connected. And now in the age of AI, people are using machine learning in some interesting ways. A lot of it is to gain context, right? And to advocate for themselves. And now that our global community, in some ways, shrinking a little bit due to the advent of social media platforms that are video based, and you're seeing other people who are sharing similar experiences, and a whole lot of people are realizing at once that they need to advocate for themselves. And as that comes up, they're looking for experiences with their providers that reassure them and that also make them feel seen and heard in terms of their concerns. What everybody wants out of that relationship is to be healthy and to feel safe. And there's a big part that solutions can play in that, much the same that email marketing plays in e-commerce. A great email marketing campaign can really set up in terms of when you're going to receive a shipment and what comes next and reviewing it and getting you back into the product. Patient portal systems can do the same thing. And being able to take advantage of the automations that are set up, making sure that the CRM for those systems has kind of a 360 view of the patient, and that there's easy ways to get their results all together so that a provider can have a global view and work in tandem with other providers to help someone really design what their wellness journey looks like.
I like that. And you mentioned about, the customer, the patient retention. But
Hmm.
speaking kind of that to your business, I know you've had a pretty high success rate on doing that. Are you able to speak more into that and what you might be able to attribute that to? Is it a particular system or a process that has allowed you to achieve that level of the retention?
It's a focus, it's an ethos. So I began in luxury businesses, luxury retail businesses, probably about 15, 16 years ago after coming from running some other businesses. And I came in just about maybe 6 months before the recession hit, late 2007, early 2008. I noticed that where I was at, the market I was in, I still had new folks moving into community. I still had a variety of opportunities to connect with my customer base and to be able to sell. And people were looking for something that was beyond just shopping. They were looking for experiences they couldn't get anywhere else. They were looking for experiencing products in community. And this developed kind of a career long ethos that if you focus on bringing people together, and content marketing is a huge part of this as well, that you're focusing on the resonant stories that really instill trust and play upon the emotions of your customers. And in this case, your patients. With healthcare, it's a heightened sense of trust that you really can tap into if you're proactive, if you are drawing on what you see in other B2B businesses that have succeeded, and you're applying it creatively because it feels different. And when people feel heard and seen, they're going to come into the providers and offer so much more. You're going to get to uh, what you need to discover that much more quickly. You're also going to develop the trust that keeps them coming back, scheduling on time, following up with labs, going to referrals. And you're going to get them to offer up more of what they see holistically across their lives instead of just maybe a complaint that sits with one provider. And those are the things that are just gold for providers to be able to really provide the best outcomes for their patients. And then, in a sense, as a business, because so many providers are independent or in smaller collectives, that's what provides the long term business advantage in terms of retention. Because customer acquisition costs are high across all kinds of B2B businesses, whether those are product based or solution software based, or they're based, in the healthcare vertical. And to have someone churn, whether that is a B2C customer or that is a patient, you're looking at an acquisition cost that can be 2 to 3, 4 times as high as it was to acquire that first patient or customer. So, meanwhile, if you can retain them and start to build those relationships, people talk. And one of the first places you'll even see this in digital spaces like Reddit, people go to others that they know personally or they know more generally in community, others who look like them, others who've gone through the same things that they have, others that they trust, and ask as far as recommendations. And really trust those sometimes over anything else that a practice might put on their landing page or talk about in their offices. And a lot of that stems back to how those patients, how those customers were made to feel as they went through their own experience with the provider.
Yeah, I like that. I know you've mentioned trust a lot, and I did some research years ago when I was looking at, uh, adding this other service line to my business, and it really has shown that people really do place a lot of trust in others they may not know simply just by, and that's why a lot of times you see so many services encouraging businesses to go get those Google reviews because
Yeah.
that has a lot of implicit trust with people. Because it's you don't know the person, so it's not like they can be biased one way or the other towards you or them.
Yeah, it's so funny. As I had started, it started with a few of my providers. It extended to my labs, where I got drafted in one day into doing a little solutioning at the Quest Labs location, because I was there and I was like, I can help, just do a little troubleshooting that'll help the phlebotomist who was kind of swamped. I know what it's like to be the point person responsible for patient experience, customer experience, and the technology. And as I got into this more, it was funny. There was so much that could be drawn from the solutioning that's going on in and around e-commerce uh, and digital marketing for e-commerce that the healthcare industry could totally take advantage of. There's so many free resources out there that, yes, that in the same way that people say, optimize your website. If you have products on your website, make sure that they are above the folds, that you don't have to scroll down. Same thing goes for providers, solo providers and small practices. Make sure that when that lands, that you have a journey set up for them, that it's not just that you have a billboard online. This is the entry for patients to discover you and what you're about and to find signals of trust. And they're usually coming here from recommendations, maybe sometimes from searches. It's interesting using Google Analytics, for example, just to have an idea of where people are coming from. Are they coming from any ads that you've placed? Are they coming from Google reviews? Are they coming from Reddit? Are they coming from Yelp? You'd be surprised in terms of where people are going to source information about providers that will listen to them and treat them with dignity and respect and take them seriously, because it's another level of critical in terms of having providers that you can trust, the right providers that will listen, will take your symptoms seriously, and will be proactive towards better outcomes instead of allowing folks to just deal with it.
Yeah. And I wanted to touch on another point you made because you earlier had mentioned something about community. And I want to say that that's probably another big piece of the puzzle because I know a lot of people will be drawn to where there's a community. And I actually know from kind of experience here in Houston,
Mm,
the other year, for a while, I started going to this networking event that this one practice actually held at their place, and
I love that.
it
I
was a
love
multi
that.
discipline practice. So they would do some networking events to get people in the door, but they would
Hmm.
also do some other kind of more wellness things, like they would host yoga classes and stuff for people as well. So
Yeah.
I can,
I'm in Austin and I'm seeing some of the same things. There is a collective here called Willpower. It focuses more on the B2C side, but they are starting to put arms into B2G, so into government as well as into health and wellness, and especially highlighting consumer products that, can be utilized in conjunction with small practices. But I love that, the fact that, and I hope that you went up to tell them, because who does that in terms of inviting people in, and just how safe does that make that practice to have kind of an open house to experience them? I think that's incredible. And it really shows some flexibility and some ingenuity in taking what's worked well in other spaces in terms of retention and growing lifetime value for patients, because this is something we don't really talk about when we get into healthcare so much. But in order to keep the lights on, in order to continue to serve a community, practitioners really are thinking about, their bottom line. And if you are able to better retain and then being able to open up and to gain new customers that way, and then to proactively solicit your patient base for reviews, to start with, just keeping them internal, to have kind of an always on voice, but then also to take them externally as far as Google and Yelp and other places, but then also a referral program. That's a huge thing right now in a lot of e commerce, and that's complete white space in healthcare. Just imagine in terms of actually talking to your patients to give them a little bit of an indication of, like, if you really like your relationship here, you know, please, this is how you would want to send us a referral, or tell us who you'd like us to reach out to, and we'll take care of the rest. Uh, if you meet customers and patients where they're at, oh, just it becomes so much easier. You're taking that cognitive load off, and you will be able to get great information. And that's how you continue to grow your practice without spending more and more in terms of marketing that may not have that same kind of return on investment.
yeah, it's a very interesting concept, and I can see where it definitely works. Like I know, probably I think where it would have a tremendous value is those that are operating on like the direct primary care model.
Yes.
But then I also know from some clients that I've worked with where, they are very much at the mercy of what insurance companies and Medicare dictate that they can charge. So obviously, they are much more limited. And sometimes they're almost more of a specialty where it's not necessarily people or patients come directly to them, but it's referrals from other providers that they rely on.
Yes. Yes. And so then it becomes about another layer of community, doesn't it? In terms of partnerships, so that you are top of mind where you have to think backwards, reverse engineer, starting with where the patient sits. If you are in a specialty, examining where you are getting referrals from and where would you like to get referrals from? And then have you made connections back to those providers? Are you memorable? Do they understand what you do? There's definitely some content marketing here to be done, just some storytelling to share with them what happens in your practice, how patients feel about you, and that establishes some trust up front. And then what can you do for them? You don't want to show up just saying, hey, send folks my way. You want to show up and say, hey, what can I do for you? How can I help? How can we help one another? So that could be as easy as, creating community in small spaces around practices where you start to have networks, informal networks that solution together in terms of, all right, how do we together negotiate some of the red tape and some of the rates and some of the challenges in getting things approved and working with particular insurance companies. None of this happens in a vacuum, right? Every provider is having to work with sometimes the same major companies and probably running into similar issues, but not really having community to talk about that with other people. And that's where, take a page from the B2C world and you can establish that while still maintaining confidentiality. This is more like professional growth community. And it can be very informal, but have incredible payoff in terms of a solid ongoing business. The last thing that any provider wants is to see churn that might impact them financially in the short term, if not the long term, because it takes their focus away from what they do so well. It's an interesting thing where providers have to do two jobs at once. They have to be providers, first and foremost, but they also have to be business leaders. And those can sometimes sit in opposition. If you are working from the patient backwards in terms of providing long-term care that can extend over generations, can encompass entire neighborhoods and communities and networks, then you're building in a way that if you have to change your business model, as long as you're doing it in a thoughtful manner that provides more value for your patients or continues to provide that same elevated care, they're going to understand. I'm sure you've seen in the last few years, at least, the rise of concierge medicine, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a big thing, right? And you know why that's so resonant, why people are willing to go that route? Because there have been so many roadblocks and so much friction in normal private practice and in small groups. And a lot of it is avoidable. And it just takes getting together and sharing the load in terms of discovery and looking into collecting feedback from patients to see what would make them want to stay there. And usually concierge medicine is, pay up front. They're paying a premium. Also go and investigate what they're doing. What through lines are there? What inspiration, what pieces, what processes can you bring over into your own practice that make sense, that give you that same elevation? Because when you have that and you're really working backwards from the patient, it's a no brainer in terms of who they're going to trust and who they're going to choose.
Well, and I can even speak from that patient perspective because I actually use those kind of practices. Have been for
Hmm.
years.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest thing is a lot of them, they don't use insurance. And sometimes insurance is what really complicates a lot of the type of care that we can receive, but also the fact that now, I have almost, unlimited access to the provider or group of
Hmm.
providers. So if something is more urgent, you don't have to wait. Oh, the office is closed. You don't have to go to urgent care or the ER.
Yeah.
What was the other piece I just had in my head and it went away? I mean, there's a lot of other benefits, but the fact that and then, of course, when you do have to go in for an office visit, they can actually take the time, depending on what it is, they'll spend a good hour with you versus, you go to a traditional practice where, you know, it's how many patients can we squeeze in one day, and the doctor comes in and they're
Mm.
maybe in there all of 5 minutes. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, so what did the doctor actually just do for me?
Yeah. And the funny thing is that most patients would probably be happy with something in the middle, right? The whole ethos here is I feel human. Am I seen? Are my concerns treated as valid? So the pieces that providers, who are not in the concierge space can do is look at how can we pull, how can we engage our patients, and especially how can we do that in a repeatable manner through the solutions that we employ, right? And then do we have someone empowered on our staff to be able to take that and aggregate it in a way that keeps it anonymized, but it provides insights into what would work well across folks. But also now, especially in the digital age where, you know, a lot of this is very possible and there are specialized platforms to do it in a way that protect patient confidentiality. Yeah, making sure that someone on your team or someone's, that's the better thing as far as the more distributed you can in terms of knowledge, the better. Um, that they have some idea how to use it, that it doesn't feel like it's overwhelming. Because those folks, the ones who work, you know, as far as the front office in practices, they're probably one of the most important parts of the patient experience. And I can tell you, going into any review section on Google or Yelp, big pattern that you will see has a lot to do with how was that front of house experience. Can't tell you how many times I've seen where the front of house experience wasn't great, and then even though the provider was wonderful, we came back to that because it caused that friction. What that tells me is that there hasn't been enough invested in that front of house team to really make them feel like they are owners of the brand experience. A practice is a brand, and you want that brand to convey trust and accuracy and security. And that starts with the first people that check them in, arrange their next follow-ups, remind them, and also can look for where people have questions. If people aren't prompting for questions, then they may not get answers from their community. Now, for folks who might be listening to your podcast who are in concierge, I mean, obviously, you have a tremendous advantage here to take advantage of all of the elevations that are going on in other types of B2C or B businesses where it is about the intangible, the brand equity of what can you promise and deliver on in a repeatable manner. Because that's hard to scale. I can tell you from being in luxury, being able to scale and still maintain that kind of elevated personal relationship, that can be hard. And tooling is really the key here in terms of the investment in a tool, compared to looking at the impact that it would have in overall revenue. So something like, an email marketing system that really fits and has great deliverability and has a structure that you can explain to folks context, what to expect, give them ideas of what comes next in their healthcare journey. Because a lot of folks going into concierge start with, I just want more access. I want to feel heard. I don't want to wait, forever. I don't want to be minimized. But when they get there, it's like, okay, and now what? And in order to learn more about those patients, in order to provide that much more of an elevated experience that keeps them attached, loyal, and bringing other folks in, it's then looking towards creative inspirations. You know, how do consumer brands do this and really maintain emotionally connected relationships over many years? Because concierge medicine can do this too.
Well, I appreciate that insight. I know we had covered a lot so far, but want to kind of transition a little bit, kind of
Hmm.
a little bit more kind of about you, talking
Sure.
about your role. So, what part of your work gives you the most energy? And what do you love the most about helping organizations improve their customer or patient experience?
Goodness, I love to solve problems. And that's probably the first part. I am a true solutioner. I would say that, where I'm at is called revenue operations. It means that I can go into specializations around several different points, whether that is the customer's experience and the stickiness and really focusing on making them feel seen and heard and delighted. It's not just the removal of negative emotions that provides a better experience, right? Whether that is in B2C or in healthcare, it's how do you infuse it with positive emotions, right? That keeps someone from going to another practice or going to another provider. But beyond that, I love people and systems and just it's a lifelong passion to learn about the way that relationships are constructed, especially through a business. And it's really how we relate to one another. Um, and it's how we feel both connected and important. And nowhere is that more important than around your healthcare journey, and those journeys of those that you love. And in a day and age where we've heard some just horror stories about the ways that technology is being utilized in top down fashion in places that it absolutely should not be, especially based on the types of technologies that are being used. For example, utilizing AI machine learning, which is predictive text strings. That's not, using that in a top down manner, just handing that over with healthcare concerns is not appropriate. And even if there were safeguards in terms of privacy, it's still not appropriate because that is a model that's predicting in text strings. You know, uh, but there are other uses that are totally appropriate, and you can see in terms of national and international news right now, where we're hearing about the ability to aggregate data. Large data sets, large results from clinical trials, and doing that so much faster. That's really where the beauty of machine learning comes in and being able to have some types of pattern acuity. It's not the same as human pattern acuity, but all of this is in service to providers. And then I think one thing that I've learned working across B2C in both physical, like retail, and e-commerce is that when folks come to AI, machine learning, a lot of what they're actually looking for is automation and being able to connect different pieces of the patient journey or the customer journey in terms of seeing a provider and the communication beforehand and follow up that really makes them feel involved and safe. And a lot of that you don't need necessarily AI for. So it's also looking into automation solutions that are built for healthcare so that they are compliant and, you know, have good consistency. And then with whatever solution that you have, empowering people within your practice and multiple ones, I would say fractionally, because the more you spread that out, the less it's going to be a burden on one person. And all of this is information that's going to help the business rather than hinder it. because it's separate from confidential information. But the more everyone feels like they can have knowledge into and a say around the choices that are made in terms of tools that are used, the more invested they are, the more they're going to report proactively anything that they see that doesn't sit quite right. And the less large knots you're going to have to untangle. For example, I know we were just talking at the top of the hour when we got together about cybersecurity. And we just had another AWS outage that started early yesterday morning. And hopefully, a lot of businesses learned from the last major one that affected so much of AWS. Because really, cyber attacks never stop. It's just in terms of the right one hitting and getting a few layers deep. So what are providers doing, and and I mean by that both software providers and healthcare providers, what are they doing on their side to be involved citizens? For software providers, that is thinking about when things go down, how do practices still run, and being proactive in terms of that communication. Now, a lot of software providers think this is kind of antithetical because we don't want to talk about when things go wrong. But is that the more that someone is familiar and has agency, the better they're going to do and the better service they're going to provide to their patients. Same thing then goes for providers, having folks, especially in their front office teams, but also the providers themselves who understand how to use the solutions in their practice and they have point people to go back to their providers when something isn't working, to work together to resolve it quickly. And then also around something like this, that they have someone that they can reach because we might, pay attention to this. I think I caught it maybe as I was waking up and having coffee, the word about this, because so many people were reporting, in terms of businesses that were and services that were on AWS that were going down. But that's not everyone. Not everyone has that same context. So you could have, small practices who come in and they're just, I don't know what to do. So then how do you manage that, communication? What happens in the case of an emergency that can leave both sides feeling like they have a better handle on it and they can go back to doing what they do best, which is really providing great service and better outcomes for their patients.
Thank you for that. And as we kind of have our last couple minutes here, as we
Yeah.
get to wrapping up, I'll just ask one final question. Are there any big projects or initiatives that you're currently focused on, like new tech integrations, process improvements, or
Mm.
tools to help reduce friction in the patient experience?
I'm not doing any projects in patient experience right at the moment, but I do have availability. So if someone is looking, please, I'll have them get in touch with you. And if anyone's looking for recommendations, I love to get under the hood and, talk solutions. In the past, it's been around really being able to ensure that systems are connected to the rest of kind of your business tech stack. That's been a huge one. And that really moves the needle in ways that people just don't think about. Beyond that, is the products that you're using in your practice really working for you? Are the account managers, customer success managers, solutions engineers, are they responsive? Do you feel heard? Do you feel that they proactively reach out to you to kind of show you how things are going, or do they really just kind of reach back when it's time for renewal? And a lot of providers they're not familiar with this world, so they just don't know what they're able to advocate for. And then beyond that, it's for a little while was kind of working back and forth into some mobile labs to kind of just give them quality assurance kind of feedback in terms of things that were going on out into some of their small mobile labs that could have a major impact. But yeah, right now, in terms of my own business, I'm focused on kind of my next pivot into probably a role that sits somewhere in customer experience and solutions integrations, and in particular, what's called unified commerce, which is solutions that have in the B2C world a back end that's connected to the front end, and it goes through several products so that anything that you're using additionally with one product, eventually you'll be able to use it in different environments. Because in the B2C world, that's how consumers experience the products that they buy. And I could see that, in the next few years coming for healthcare as well, as it still continues to diversify. We still are seeing different private equity and other financial groups getting involved in different types of practices and consolidations or closures happening with hospital systems. And there's going to be a big reckoning too, as it's now about 10 years since a lot of hospital systems digitized. And that's going to start to show signs of wear. And it's kind of thinking, are people ready for what comes next to make sure that they can continue to serve their populations and that they're not in for a huge price tag? So I would say to everyone out there, just be curious. Start looking around. If you don't know how your systems work, ask, see where you can and find community. Offer community yourselves. You don't know quite what you'll be able to get until you just start applying a little bit of scientific method and experimenting.
All right. Well, Jennifer, I really appreciate you coming on. Such a lot of insightful information. So I hope
Thank you.
those who catch this really find it helpful and beneficial because, I mean, more than enough information for someone to take and really hopefully start the process of looking at, okay, how can I improve my business? Knowing, okay, we've got this experience for our patients, for our customers, even
Hmm.
professionally with other providers. So how do we do better?
Absolutely. And it is an odd place to be, focusing as a provider first and foremost, but then also having to put that business leader hat on. But you're not doing it alone. That's the amazing thing. And folks here like David are incredible sources to not only work on technical solutions with, but also a lot of this that goes into the strategy that sits around how you use the solutions and just, the ethos in how you keep your patient base happy. So, yeah, I would say also, please, anyone who's listening to this, reach out to David as well.
Well, thank you. And for those who'd like to know more and how to contact either one of us, please check out the description below the video for all of our information. And once again,
Thank
Jennifer,
you.
appreciate you coming on.